Welcome to another segment of the Azimuth Podcast. I am your host, Kimberly McNabb.
And I'm Barrett McNabb.
In this segment, we will be discussing the push for green energy. But before we dive into all the different facets of the, as Vivek Ramaswamy termed it, the green agenda, we would like to cover the story in the news. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm made headlines on having her staff block a charging station for EVs with a combustible engine vehicle so that she would be assured of a place to charge. Blocking an EV charging station with combustible engine vehicles is a practice known as icing, which is illegal in some places like DC, but fortunately for the Energy Secretary, is not illegal in Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. The Energy Secretary plans this trip in her EV so that she can document it on TikTok or something like that. And she has 4 staffers driving gasoline-powered vehicles that are, just playing leapfrog to snag up all of the spaces. I mean, it's a 600-mile road trip with their staffers. It's a publicity stunt to highlight that one can have a fun road trip in an EV. But, man, how out of touch is she and the other politicians in the D.C. area? If only the rest of us had an entourage to make sure that we could make it to our destinations safely. And, again, to have the audacity to take a gasoline-powered vehicle that you're not going to utilize the EV charger and you're just going to block it, while a family who is in an electric vehicle, and it was a husband, wife, and a baby, and needed a charge, and it's a hot day. They needed the spot more. And I mean,
it's August in Georgia. It's hot.
It's hot. It's hot. And so the staffers wouldn't move. I mean, this is wrong all the way around. But let's just say the staffer, hey, Secretary, how far out are you? Oh, you're 2 hours out. Okay, well, how about I move so you can get a little bit of this stuff? So no, they're like, nope, we're occupying it. So the family calls the police, and then all of a sudden it was, hey, you know what? Turns out maybe we could share it. I mean, this is an absolute joke. When I first saw it, and until I actually saw this Energy Secretary in the vehicles, I was like, you have got to be kidding me. But this is, a town, like you said, just outside of Augusta, Georgia. And despite having the Masters golf tournament, the area is pretty remote.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got Fort Gordon there, but which is the home of the U.S. Army's Signal Corps. But there really probably aren't a lot of charging options around.
No, absolutely not. Well, as outrageous as this is, I am from Georgia, and I've planned a lot of road trips, with our moves as a military family and in planning itineraries to get to all the marathons that I've done in all 50 states, most of which I've had to drive to. So what confuses me is this road trip. 600 miles would be like less than 2 tanks of gas in a normal combustible engine. And even in an EV is what, 2 charges? So why was this scheduled for 4 days? Did she have press conferences along the way?
She had to do TikToks.
Okay, there. But then the trip was from Charlotte, North Carolina to Memphis, Tennessee. So the first map, if you pull up Google Maps, it goes all the way up from North Carolina to Nashville, then over to Memphis. Okay, well, what are other driving options? Okay, you go from Charlotte, North Carolina, down through Greenville, South Carolina, crossing into Atlanta, and then, back up on your way to Memphis. So even crossing from Greenville, South Carolina, dipping towards Atlanta, you're still a really far way from Augusta, Georgia. So I'm like, well, I don't understand why she was even close to this town, but the logical reasoning of someone from DC. So there you go.
Well, I tell you what, it's always fun to see another story highlighting how out of touch politicians really are than the average American. So good on this family for calling her out.
Yeah. And to think, in California, Governor Newsom has regulation that by 2035, all cars sold will be electric vehicles. And last week, CNN reported that the U.S. Department of Energy will push the auto industry's transition to electric vehicles with $12 billion in loans and grants to assist in the conversion of automakers into manufacturing for electric vehicles. So the administration has a policy proposal that would require EVs to account for 2/3 of new cars sold by 2032. It's not that far off.
It's not that far off. I mean, when you think of, hey, 6 months, hey, 2 years, hey, 5 years, hey, 9 years. It's 9 years away. It's not that far off at all. But first, let's talk about something interesting, seemingly innocuous, and even the butt of many comedians' jokes: plastic straws. Did you know these so-called green utensils might not be as eco-friendly as we think?
That's right. Researchers in Belgium found that paper straws, often touted as eco-friendly alternative, contain harmful forever chemicals known as PFAS, or polyfluoroalkyl substances, and refer to a collection of long-lasting chemicals that take a very long time to slowly break down in the environment. And there are health risks associated with PFAS. There's an increased risk of some cancers, including prostate, kidney, and testicular cancers, reduced ability of the body's immune system to fight infections, including reduced vaccine responses, interference with the body's natural hormones. And it's not just about health. According to the EPA, PFAS can also persist in the environment for a very long time and end up in the blood of people and animals, as well as air, water, soil, and in low levels in food, packaging, and household products. Surprisingly, these chemicals are found in various types of straws. They were found in 90% of the paper straws and 75% in plastic straws.
So we opened discussing the push for electric vehicles, but currently they account for less than 1% of the vehicles on the road. I'd say that the Energy Secretary's story put a little light as to why that is.
Well, Barrett, I'd say there is even more to it than just range. Electric vehicles come with a hefty price tag, averaging around $66,000, which is $18,000 more than the average combustible engine, and more than some people make. And the strain on the electrical grid can't be ignored. The grid, especially in summer and hot places like here in Houston, are already strained, with the government telling people to keep their AC at 77. Well, they can enjoy their terranium. But plugging an EV to your home is like adding another air conditioner. Yeah, a whole nother air conditioner.
That's crazy.
And it's a real concern, especially for those in areas with high electricity costs already. Isn't it bad enough that 20 million Americans are already behind in paying their electric bills as it is?
Again, that's crazy. But utility companies are also facing significant costs because they have to invest in the upgrades and the infrastructure in order to support the growing number of EVs. Utility companies will need to add $5,800 in upgrades for every new EV in the next 8 years. That is insane. And what about the charging stations? A study found that 1/3 of San Francisco EV charge stations were not working. So not only are they few and far between, but not all of them are going to work once you get there. And what about adding them to apartment complexes? How's that going to work? Who pays for the shared energy there?
If you have a hard enough time getting landlords to fix the units, good luck with that.
Yeah. If you have 200 units, are you going to have 200 charging stations that work all of the time? I think it could be difficult enough to get landlords to get anything repaired, just like you said.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not just personal vehicles either. The EPA also wants large trucks, as in 18-wheelers, to be electric vehicles by 2032 as well. A clean diesel long-haul tractor costs between $180,000 to $200,000 as it is. An electric version costs $300,000 or more, so basically double the price. And to boot, 95% of the trucking companies are small businesses. So you're really kicking down the little guys.
Yeah, and if you're thinking charging a little EV is an issue, Energy Secretary, imagine charging a long-haul tractor. The charge of an electric truck is 10 hours and can go 150 to 300 miles, while a diesel can go 6 times further. So you'd have to add 10 hours of charging 6 times for the same trip. The same vehicle would also have to add 8,000 pounds of weightable batteries for the same vehicle, which means that you're going to be able to carry less cargo because the Department of Transportation has maximum limits on what a truck and other vehicles can weigh.
Yeah. Has anyone noticed those weigh stations on the highway? Those long-haul tractors are regulated to not go over a certain weight, so they'd have to carry less cargo. Between taking longer for the same trip and carrying less food,
this would drastically increase prices. Imagine everyday Americans are paying $700 more a month for food for the same household as 2 years ago. How many times higher do you think groceries would be if this cost is passed on down to the consumer?
Yeah, because 70% of all goods are trucked in America. So these increased prices would affect a large portion of the economy.
In the best case scenario, with everything running smoothly, truckers are also worried about lithium batteries in extreme heat, such as Nevada, and extreme cold, such as the northeastern winters. These conditions can kill the lifespan of lithium batteries.
Now, not using gas sounds like a great idea, but what does it take to actually make the electric vehicle? The batteries require cobalt, with 70% of global supply coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo. NPR describes the conditions of mining for cobalt as modern-day slavery. Workers use stretches of rebar to scrounge the earth in trenches to get the cobalt. Cobalt is toxic to touch and breathe for these workers. In addition, millions of trees have to be cut down for the space to mine the cobalt.
Now, one has to ask, how can we power the electric vehicles? Electricity does not come from nothing. Where does the electricity come from? Fossil fuel-based power plants create 60% of the electric grid, with 20% coming from nuclear, solar, or wind. And I tell you what, when you're plugging in the vehicle, and I've seen memes where plugging into the wall socket your EV, and then in the background a coal-fired plant kicks on so that you can get that. So
my favorite is a picture of an EV charged to a gas-powered generator, and it says, it's like when a vegan secretly eats meat.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, in Germany, wind and hydropower output are just too low to make up for shutting down 3 nuclear power plants and for the Russian-Ukraine war curbing gas exports. So Germany, as well as other parts of Europe, have been burning lignite. Now, this is called the dirtiest and most polluting version of coal for energy. And in other parts of Europe, they're using wood for energy. Yeah, like man make fire, ancient times. Technically, this is called biomass power, and it's counted and subsidized as zero emissions renewable energy. As a result, European utilities now import tons of wood from the United States forest every year. And Europe's supposedly eco-friendly economy now generates more energy from burning wood than from wind and solar combined. This transition away from fossil fuels has sparked a boom in the U.S. wood pellet industry, which has built 23 mills throughout the South over the past decade and is actually trying to brand itself as a 21st century green energy business. Its basic argument is that the carbon released while trees are burning shouldn't count because it's eventually offset by the carbon absorbed while other trees are growing. But couldn't that be said of fossil fuel too?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of laughable because, small trees have fewer leaves, and fewer leaves are absorbing less carbon. So I don't see how cutting down a fully realized and mature tree in order to turn it into wood pellets. But wait, we planted an acorn, and so there's a little teeny tree that's going to grow up. It's not a even Steven swap.
No.
It's not an even Steven swap. So I mean, I just don't understand. But I tell you what, I think most people would prefer something that's actually clean, like solar panels. We often don't think of them as the future of clean energy, but are they as efficient as we believe?
Well, the reality is that solar panels and wind turbines are less efficient than fossil fuels. Plus, there's a need for smart grids to optimize their power production. Comprehensive advanced smart grids with the capability to swiftly adjust energy supply according to demand, maximizing the use of clean energy sources while minimizing reliance on fossil fuels, do not exist, which poses a challenge to energy service providers.
And let's not forget about the environmental impact. The production of photovoltaic cells for solar panels often involve the use of hazardous chemicals, which, if not managed responsibly, can have detrimental effects on the local ecosystems and wildlife. Large-scale solar farm installations often require land clearing, which can further disrupt native plants and animals. In an ideal scenario, all solar panels would be efficiently recycled, but solar panel recycling remains a really complex and costly process. Thus, a significant portion of discarded solar panels end up in e-waste facilities, where valuable materials like aluminum, glass, copper are salvaged, while the remaining components are typically shredded and disposed of in landfills. Obviously, they leach into the soil and table water and things like that afterwards. But with all the upstream, midstream, and downstream production process for solar panels and for lithium-ion batteries, it's a horrible environmental impact. But for solar panels and wind turbines, Bloomberg reports that getting to zero carbon by 2050 would require a land area equal to 5 South Dakotas to develop and run clean power to run all EV homes. However, in places like off the coast of Cape Cod, people do not want their ocean views spoiled by wind turbines.
Not my backyard.
It's the old not my backyard argument. Also, according to Foreign Policy, moving to a carbon-free energy future requires the extraction and mining of 34 million tons of copper, 40 million tons of lead, 50 million tons of zinc, 162 million tons of aluminum, and 4.8 billion tons of iron. Yet no one wants to allow the dirty act of mining to occur. As for wind turbines alone, there's a graveyard of wind turbines in Casper, Wyoming. It's the final resting place for 1,000 fiberglass turbine blades. And these blades have reached the end of their 25-year working life. Each one will be cut into 3, and then the pieces will be stacked and buried. About 2 gigawatts worth of turbines will be refitted in 2019 and 2020, and disposing of them in an environmentally friendly way is a growing problem.
Well, Vivek Ramaswamy said during the first GOP debate that green policies kill more people than climate change. Now, why on earth would he say that? Is he a conspiracy theorist? Well, there could be support for that claim in 2 recent instances. Hawaiian Electric acknowledged in 2019 that it needed to work on preventing power lines from emitting sparks. However, in 3 years, it has made minimal effort. Instead, Hawaiian Electric's focus has been on transitioning to renewable energy sources following a surge in oil prices in 2008. As the island heavily relies on petroleum imports for 80% of its energy production. In 2015, state legislatures enacted legislation mandating that Hawaii derive 100% of its electricity from renewable sources by 2045. So, in this instance, dedication to renewable energy, Hawaiian Electric overlooked essential wildfire prevention and thus contributed to the wildfires.
Everyone needs to look at the bigger picture. You know what's not green? Turning an island into ash and sending so much smoke into the air and killing more than 100 people and who knows how many animals.
Well, speaking of wildfires, I will often read that climate change caused any particular wildfire. The Yosemite wildfire in 2022 was initially blamed on climate change and had celebrity climate activists like Al Gore, here we go again, screaming climate change was actually caused by a 71-year-old man, Edward Wackerman. In 2018, the National Geographic attributed 95% of California's wildfires were from human-related activity, whether it's from power lines or campfires. Even the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions states that more than 80% of wildfires are started by human activity, not by climate change. The wildfires that sent smoke into New York City a few months ago have also been attributed to human activity. Now, while warmer temperatures do make the conditions worse,
Fair.
Climate change does not start wildfires.
Well, that wraps up our segment on green energy. We hope it sheds some light on the complexities and challenges associated with renewable technologies.
And remember, there's no such thing as a free lunch. It is essential to weigh the costs and the benefits of everything, including environmental initiatives.
Indeed. Going green isn't just about good intentions. It's about understanding real-world implications and the cost. You got to think about the second and third order effects.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for joining us on Azimuth Podcast. Stay tuned after these messages. Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.